a wildlife documentary crew heads into the Colombian jungle to film Pablo Escobar's infamous cocaine hippos, only to find something far more deadly, a bloodthirsty pod of hippos that are not just invasive and unstoppable, but hungry.
What's that? You want to be scared? Come with me. You will experience tales of horror, ghosts, and death. It is not recommended for the weak at heart. Listen in the dark. It's more fun that way. This is Weekly Spooky.
Hello, my spookies. It's Wednesday, and you know what that means. It's time for a little spooky in your weekly. I'm your host and narrator, Enrique Couto, and we have a little piece of South American summertime terror just for you to sink your teeth into. But before we get to that, I want to say thank you so much for joining us as we keep spooky season alive all year long right here. We never slow down, we never stop bringing you the Halloween season, and we're so happy to have you here with us. So make sure you're subscribed on your favorite podcasting app, because this Friday we have a very special compilation of some of the most terrifying stories we've ever published about creatures of the night, of the fanged variety. You won't want to miss it, so subscribe on your favorite podcasting app and leave us a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. It really does help the program. And if you want to support us in a very direct way, you can head to weeklyspooky.com/join, and for as little as $1 a month, get 2 bonus shows every single month, as well as over 5 years of audiobooks and creepypasta readings. That's weeklyspooky.com/join. But as for tonight, they say hippos kill more people than any predator in Africa. But what happens when they escape to a jungle halfway across the world? Tonight's tale follows a film crew deep into the Colombian wild, where the animals aren't the only ones on edge, and some creatures were never meant to leave the zoo. So, get yourself comfortable and maybe grab a snack, because tonight's story is all about a massive hunger, and we're telling it right after this. Stay Hungry by David O'Hanlon. Ella Scott watched in disbelief as the man passed the folded bills to the boat captain. Kane Marlowe was one of the most infamous poachers in the world, and, last she'd heard, was in a Kenyan prison. She doubted he'd been released on good behavior. Ella's face reddened as Marlowe went to stow his luggage. Her fingernails dug into her palms, and her entire body shook. Keith, the cameraman for the documentary, stepped in front of her with his hands raised defensively. "Deep breaths," he said. "It's just a mix-up, I'm sure." Ella shoved him out of her way and stormed over to the captain, grabbing for his collar, but mostly getting chest hair. The short, stocky man whined and slapped at her hands. "What are you thinking?" she demanded. "That I didn't ask for a manscaping." He rubbed his chest. "You want to go up the river or no?" "Yes," Ella barked back. "To film the hippos migrating, not being butchered. God damn it, Luis. Do you know who that is?" "Of course," Luis said. "He's the guy that just paid me a lot more than you did to go to the exact same place. I can make a dozen trips to more popular locations in the same time. This trip is not cost-effective. I got plenty of room. If someone else wants to come along, I'll take them too." "I think you misunderstood," Keith chimed in. "Ella is concerned because that man is a poacher. I don't care how he eats his eggs." Luis shrugged and started up to the ship's helm. "He'll slaughter them," Ella said. "This is Colombia, Miss Scott." Luis leaned on the rusted railing. "This village here has been burned down at least 3 times since I've been alive. Human life is cheap. Hippos aren't. Many men pay to hunt these animals. You're upset that he is here, but you use this boat, so you'll tolerate him." "I understand it's your boat, but—" "It's their boat," the captain cut her off. "The hunters are why this boat has a running motor. They are the reason I was able to pay off my debts when your hippos killed the fish I used to catch for a living. You hate the hunters, but the hunters are the only reason you're going upriver. To go where you wish, you either take this boat or you swim." "Guess we're riding with the poacher," Keith muttered. "I'm not letting him kill anything," Ella said. "Mark my words." After the Colombian government slaughtered the bull named Pepe, there had been an international outcry to protect the so-called cocaine hippos. Pablo Escobar had imported 4 of the animals for his private zoo back in the 80s, which had escaped into the wild after his death. Without a dry season, they begun reaching sexual maturity faster. Their number had swelled to at least 200 in the years since. If interventions weren't found, there would be 1,000 by the end of the next decade. In recent months, reports had come in of hippopotamus sightings far from Medellin, however. A local group of activists, exploiting the rampant political corruption, had supplied Ella with satellite imagery of the area, as well as aerial photographs of what appeared to be 3 juveniles, several hundred miles to the north. Ella studied the photos with the same intrigue she had when she first seen them. In the alien jungles of South America, the animals often behaved in ways unseen among their African relatives. Still, it seemed unreasonable for a group to break off from the herd when all their needs were being met in the Magdalena River they called home. If they had been forced out by a dominant bull, then they should have stopped moving once they were outside his range, which would have been no more than 10 miles. The exodus made no sense. Ella needed to film them in the wild and to figure out exactly why they had moved so far. She had to show the world that the Colombian hippo had become its own species, if she wanted to save them. They'd been on the river all day. Keith had occupied himself with filming establishing shots for the first few hours. Ella had shot 33 takes of her introduction, detailing the history of the hippos in Colombia, the efforts to contain them, and how they had transformed from an invasive species to a meaningful part of the ecosystem that they now lived within. Keith wasn't sure he bought into that last part, no matter how many times she made him reshoot it. He was from Indiana and had seen the negative effects of feral hogs firsthand. The hippos were a lot bigger and more ill-tempered than the pigs back home. They'd started their trip at the tourist trap in Medellin. The hippopotamuses had created a strange paradox for the locals. They killed the fish that provided the basis for their economy and diet, while simultaneously creating revenue through ecotourism. It was much cheaper to come see the hippos in South America than venturing to Africa for a pricey photo safari. Keith didn't see the appeal. The hippos did nothing but soak in a river and immodestly shit for the flashing cameras. It hardly seemed worth the airfare. While Ella reviewed the maps and photographs again, he optioned to take some still photos of the vast array of wildlife occupying the riverbanks. He zoomed in on the stone-faced Colombian, sitting at the rear of the boat. Hector filled every role on the boat as he was needed. He was a former FARC soldier, and his bare torso was pockmarked with shrapnel scars and burns from his past life. Once they made land, Hector would make sure they were safe while filming. Ella had of course protested an armed guard, but Luis had only been paid half up front and insisted Hector go with them. Keith wasn't sure if the man never spoke because he didn't know English, or if it was some sense of warrior stoicism. Either way, the cameraman found Hector as intriguing as he was frightening. Keith pried his lens away from his subject and moved to the opposite end of the rickety boat.
Don't go away. Weekly Spooky will be right back.
Kane Marlowe stood at the bow, with one boot on the edge and his Rigby rifle propped on his hip like he was gracing the cover of a Harley Quinn romance novel. He looked the part with his safari shirt sleeves rolled up over muscular forearms and the top two buttons down to show the valley between thick pectorals. Exotic oils made his golden beard glisten in the setting sun. He was a Bondi Beach Allen Quatermain. The only thing out of place about him was the ragged scar on the right side of his face. The claws had left distinctive, raised lines from his temple to his jaw. His eye was stuck in a permanent squint on account of the nerve damage. Keith wondered if some unfortunate jungle cat had turned the tables on the poacher, or if it had been his origin story. Perhaps the beast had mauled a young Marlowe, beginning his desperate need to kill them in retaliation. Like Hector, Keith found Marlowe to be more interesting than the hippos. "This is insane," Ella said, snapping him back to reality. "The photos clearly show the hippos have moved on. This is completely uncharted behavior for them. We're on to something huge here, and Crocodile Dun Dumbass wants to murder them." "Maybe they're trying to go home," Keith said. "They are moving in the general direction of Africa." Ancient Egyptians thought they were supernatural beings. Ella seemed to consider it. Perhaps the truth is somewhere in between. "Perhaps," Keith snorted. "Or perhaps you're reading too much into them going for a walk." "They've traveled over 200 miles, Ella scoffed. "That's hardly an evening stroll." "It's an invasion," Marlowe said. "That's what the Venezuelans are calling it. They've got enough problems without a bunch of hungry hippos coming to dinner." "So you're going to kill them and be the big hero?" Ella asked. "Wouldn't be much fun or profit in that," Marlowe corrected her. "If the herd crosses the border, they'll be slaughtered. That's exactly what you don't want, if I recall." "You're killing them for their own good?" Ella laughed. "That's a new spin." "I'll kill one or two," Marlowe admitted. "These animals are simply exploring their boundaries. It takes a predator to set some. Luckily, you have me. They don't go to Venezuela to be massacred, and I get a grand hunt. We both win, Miss Scott." Keith looked around the boat and raised his hand like he was back in film school. "Yes?" Marlowe asked. "There doesn't seem to be room for a dead hippo, let alone two of them," the cameraman said. "He's only bringing back the teeth," Ella said pointedly. Trading in hippo ivory is illegal. Internationally, Marlowe said with a grim smile. They're not an indigenous species, so the Colombian government doesn't have a law on the books about domestic sales. You think you Americans have the patent on rich assholes? I can sell those tusks in Bogota for a mint. I won't let that happen, Ella assured him. The sightings indicate an entire pod up there. That's big enough that we can both get the kind of shots we're looking for without being in each other's way. Marlowe stepped closer to Ella. You're on the backside of Burke now. No policia, no human rights, no fucking Starbucks. Is that supposed to be a threat? A reminder. You're not live streaming a protest outside of Maybelline. Everything out here is lethal. Piranha, crocs, anacondas, and jaguars. Even the fucking ants. Anyone can come into the jungle. But it takes a special breed to come back out. And I don't think you're of that stock. He nodded to Keith. That bloke certainly isn't. Marlowe climbed the ladder to join Louise at the helm. Ella looked back at Hector, wondering if his role as their protector extended to keeping them safe from Marlowe as well. The former soldier locked eyes with her and replaced the strap on his holster, letting her know he'd been prepared to move if things had escalated. On whose behalf he'd have acted was still a mystery. It had been a long night, so far from civilization. The wildlife went about their routines uninterrupted. All night long, animals carried on in an endless cacophony of mating calls and ferocious hunts. Every time an animal cried out from the jaws of some predator, Ella would snap awake, expecting to see Marlowe carrying a gruesome trophy back on board the boat. It never happened. Each time she was roused from sleep, she found the hunter peacefully resting in his hammock. The sounds of death must have been his favorite lullaby. He didn't stir in the slightest while she snuck away with his rifle. They made good time the next morning. Keith sat beside Luis at the helm. Ella watched him shakily pouring a fresh cup of coffee into a cracked mug with faded letters. Despite having gotten even less sleep than her, Keith seemed wide awake now. Ella went to the top of the ladder. "Keith?" she called. "Yeah!" he yipped excitedly. His feet tapped rapidly, and he was grinding his teeth. "Oh, you want me to get some more B-roll?" "That would be great." She gestured to the cup. "How much coffee have you had?" "This is my second cup." Keith nodded vigorously. Luis held up 3 fingers. "You seem a little jittery," Ella said. "It's really good." Keith slapped Luis on the back. "Folgers doesn't know shit about Colombian blend." "Colombian blend?" Ella asked. "Colombian blend," Luis said, tapping his nostril for clarity. "Take him before he shakes us off course." "Jesus, okay. No more coffee, Keith." Ella snapped her fingers, pointing to the bow. "We have work to do. Pour it over the side." "I don't think so." Luis took the mug from Keith and downed a gulp. "Last thing we need is piranhas swimming in this. Go make movies with your girlfriend and leave the coffee to the men." Keith laughed. "He thinks you're my girlfriend." "Move your ass, Keith." Ella dropped to the deck and went to stern for the camera equipment. She looked around suspiciously. Hector had stayed at the rear of the ship the entire day, but had seemingly given up his post. A sharp whistle drew her attention, and apparently the captain's, as the boat slowed.
Did you hear that? Better check the locks on your doors. Weekly Spooky will be right back.
"I think you should come and see this, Miss Scott." Marlowe shouted from the bow. Ella pulled the camera from the bag and shoved it into Keith's arms on the way past. Hector was there, cradling an assault rifle in his arms and sipping at his own coffee. Marlowe pointed to the riverbank. "You see that, Miss Scott?" he asked. "Make sure your cameraman gets a good look." Flies swarmed over the corpse of the American crocodile. It laid on its back, with its intestines bulging out of its split belly. One leg was completely torn from its body. A yellow-headed vulture tugged at a strand of muscle hanging from the stump. The bird stretched the tissue until it snapped loose. The grass was trampled around the scene, with deep hoof prints clearly visible in the mud. "There are 5,000 American crocodiles in the entire world," Marlowe said. "-1, thanks to your hippos. Maybe you two would like to get off the boat and film that." "Fuck you, Marlowe," Ella spat. "Territorial disputes happen across species in every ecosystem. Don't try to justify what you do." "That croc was at least 50 years old," Marlowe said, pointing at the carcass. "There was no dispute, dearie. This was his territory. Your hippos kill him for the sport of it. Funny how you seem to have such a problem when I do that." "The crocodile has not been dead long, maybe since last night," Hector said in an even, mechanical tone. "We should not be this close." "What do you mean?" Keith looked around, swinging the camera as he turned his head. "Close to what?" "Blimey!" Marlowe scanned the water for air bubbles. "A territorial dispute, you say?" Ella gasped. "Oh, shit." "What?" Keith shouted. "Why does everyone know what's going on except me?" "We moving on or what?" Luis asked. "We were wrong," Ella shouted. "Get down here and bring your map." Ella laid her photos and topographic map on a small table and waited for Luis to add his own. The others gathered around to hear what she said, but Hector and Marlowe kept their eyes on the river. "Hippos stay in the water most of the time, but will travel around 10 miles to graze." Ella pointed at a circle on the map. "Our photos were taken here, so we assumed they had migrated up the Magdalena to this inlet. It was the only logical place they could be, but we know a hippo was here recently. The inlet is too far away for a bull to have wandered. We were going to go right past them." "I'm thrilled for you, lady," Luis said. "But like my mother-in-law always says, you pay full price even if you don't go all the way." "Was your mother-in-law a prostitute?" Keith asked. "Second finest in all of Colombia," Luis told him. "If she'd have been the first, I'd have married her instead." "It might have worked out better," Hector added. The answer seemed so obvious that no one looked for another. Ella sketched a rough circle that joined their current location to the confirmed sighting. The calves were photographed at one end of the grazelands, and we're sitting on the other. You can't see it on my map because of the canopy, but yours is hand-drawn. There's a large pond right in the center. What isn't on your map is the tributary that feeds it. That's because we already have enough ways to get killed in this country without going down Rio de Del Mortal." "Seriously?" Ella stiffened. "It's actually called the River of Deadly Evil?" "You have a river of deadly evil?" Keith screeched. "Of course not," Luis laughed. "It's hard enough to get tourists this far into the jungle without scary rivers. It looks narrow and shallow. Probably someone just figured there was no point drawing it on." "Can the boat make it through?" Marlowe asked. "If not, I don't give refunds." Luis sipped his coffee. "You'll both see your hippos soon." Luis ducked under a branch, careful to keep his hand on the wheel. The hull scraped noisily against the rocky banks of the narrow channel. He stood and eased back on the throttle. Navigating the unmarked river had proven more challenging than the map suggested. The jungle reached out for the boat on both sides, swatting at the passengers like it was shooting gnats. A monkey jumped from one of the trees, using the boat as a stepping stone to the other side. Louise watched the foliage to make sure it wasn't being pursued. "Alto! Alto!" Hector called out from the bow. "Something in the bushes ahead." "Check it out, quickly, pendejo!" Louise shouted back. Hector stepped onto the rail, using a branch for stability, as he hopped over a round boulder and onto the bank. The former rebel moved gracefully through the brush. He stopped in his tracks as something rustled behind him. He turned to find Ella picking herself up from the ground. "You should have stayed on the boat," Hector told her. "Many dangerous things here." Marlowe swung from a vine to land between them. He unslung the rifle from across his back. Hector groaned and signaled for both of them to stay quiet before moving on. Ella shoved past Marlowe to catch up. The hunter chuckled. The smell of death lingered, but without the usual accompaniment of scavengers. Hector pushed through waist-high grass, stepping into mud. Blood squished up around his boot soles. A hippopotamus carcass laid on its side. The bones were still wet where the meat had been removed, and its organs were strewn from its split belly all the way to the water's edge. Ornaments hung from the trees like archaic wind chimes. Ella investigated one of them. Vertebrae were spaced out along hand-braided ropes with conical spikes at the end. "These teeth are crocodilian," she said. "The bones aren't, though." "They're human," Marlowe informed them. "Some poor bastard's spine."
You're not safe yet. Weekly Spooky will be right back.
"This animal was butchered," Hector said, kneeling to examine the bare femur. "There are knife marks." "Another poacher?" Ella asked with a baleful glare at Marlowe. "Jesus, the monster's cut out its teeth." "All of them," Marlowe said. "A hunter would have only taken the tusks. These cuts are ragged and much too rough for steel. This was Indios." "Revenge," Hector rattled one of the wind chimes. "The crocodile has been revered across the globe since time began," Marlowe nodded. "The hippo killed one of their gods. They got their payback. They probably took the meat to appease the other crocs and keep in their good graces." "Holy shit!" Keith called from the boat. He zoomed in on the carnage. "That's insane! Ella, you're not going to believe this shot!" "He should probably keep quiet," Marlowe suggested, while bringing his rifle to bear. "This was a pup. The hippos will be more aggressive now." "There's too many rocks here," Louise bellowed. "I can't slow down anymore. You need to get back on the boat." "Hector, what color is the bottom of the boat?" Ella watched the croc teeth swaying on the ceremonial decor. "White, I guess," Hector shrugged. "Like a croc belly," Marlowe whispered. "Back on the boat," Louise ordered. Marlowe turned slowly, scanning the jungle for movement. Ella gasped when he pointed the rifle straight at her. She watched as his finger moved to the trigger and took up the slack. The muzzle flash stretched at her like dragon's breath, accompanying the terrifying roar of the big game rifle. The ground rumbled around her. She whirled around to see the hippo, dead at her feet. A wisp of smoke drifted from the fist-sized hole in its skull. Crikey, that was a close one. Marlowe chambered another round. Good thing I reloaded, since someone took the bullets from my rifle. No worries, I brought more. Keith screamed as the boat listed violently. Great boulders bobbed to the surface around the vessel. A muffled whoomp came from the water, jostling the boat again. The group stood, petrified as the boulders stretched open their wide jaws, and cried out. Unseen members of the pod responded throughout the jungle. An immense hippo exploded out of the water, crashing bodily onto the boat's stern. The bow rose up, throwing Luis from the helm. The captain hit the deck with a splash. 4,000 pounds of hippopotamus pressed it deeper into the water. Luis clawed at the floorboards. The beast's fetid breath washed over him as he slid closer to the gaping maw. On the shore, the others watched as Luis was dragged, screaming, beneath the surface. "Keith!" Ella cried out. "You have to jump!" Water rose around the cameraman's legs. The ship was going down fast. Hippo jaws snapped at him over the guardrails. He shook his head. "I can't jump! Are you insane?" he whined. "They'll eat me!" "You're sinking, dopey!" Marlowe shouted. "Now get off the bloody boat!" Automatic rifle fire masked any reply Keith might have given. Hector sprayed from his hip at the charging bull. The barrage did nothing to slow the beast. Hector fumbled a fresh magazine. The hippo swiped its head once, impaling the soldier with its tusks. It raised Hector's screaming body into the air, crushing his torso like an aluminum can. Marlowe knelt and fired a shot through the hippo's eye. The hippopotamus collapsed, with Hector wheezing his last breaths, still trapped between its teeth. "Everybody, run!" Marlowe barked. Keith put a foot on the railing and leapt for the shore. Ella reached out for him, and so did a hippo. The jaws closed around his legs, swinging him to the shore. Ella grabbed him by the wrists. The hippo tugged on him. Ella dug her heels into the muck and tried desperately to pull him free. The hippo gave a slight jerk, ripping Keith's legs off with ease. Ella cried as she dragged him up the embankment to her. She was torn away from him suddenly. She landed on her back, expecting to see tusks closing around her face. Instead, she saw Marlowe, dragging her away by the collar. "No!" she shouted. She clawed at the hunter's hands. "We have to help him!" "There's no help for him." Marlowe struggled to get her up. "Get on your feet!" Keith cried out. Ella wrestled free and scrambled to the edge. The big female that capsized the boat rushed out to meet her. A hoof came down on Keith. His ribcage collapsed in one wet crunch. Jaws snapped shut in front of Ella's face with enough force to blow her auburn hair back. Marlowe blasted a chunk from the beast's snout and worked the rifle bolt. "Now, can we bloody leave?" Ella used Marlowe's belt to pull herself up. The hunter swung her by the arm. Despite the uneven start, she gained her footing quickly and broke into a full sprint with Marlowe on her heels. The giant female charged out of the jungle, uprooting trees in furious pursuit of the humans. "Shoot it!" Ella pled. "I only have one more shot," Marlowe answered. "You said you had more!" "On the boat," Marlowe snarled. "What is that? Look!" Up ahead, the jungle broke open, giving way to a sun-drenched clearing full of tall grass. On the far end stood something as out of place as the cocaine hippos themselves. "Is that a mansion?" "We're not going to live long enough to find out," Marlowe growled. "That Sheila's right on our ass."
If you thought that was scary, just you wait. Weekly Spooky will be right back.
The hippo let its jaw hang open, ready to chomp through them. Marlowe knew he wouldn't have time to line up a kill shot. He threw himself into Ella, sending her careening into the lush flora. Marlowe leapt the other direction. The hippo slid and stumbled as it tried to correct course. It wheeled around, turning its head between the two possible victims. Its black eye focused on the rifle that had mauled its face. It snorted and scratched at the earth with its hoof. There was no time to aim. Marlowe's bullet went wide, striking the hippo in the neck. Blood spurted from the crater. The monster fell on a bent knee. Ella walked towards it, cupping her hands over her mouth. The hippo dragged itself along. Its jaws snapped weakly as it tried to get close to Marlowe for one final go. "Finish it," Ella sniffled. "Put it out of its misery." "I told you, I'm out of ammunition now." Marlowe laughed as the hippo collapsed. He watched it struggle for breath. "Even after all of this, you're still on their side. You still have my bullets?" Ella reached to the pocket on her vest. The brass rattled as she shakily fished out a single bullet. "That's a good lass." Marlowe walked to her and shoved the rifle into her chest. "You got the ammo. Now you have the rifle too." Marlowe leaned against a tree trunk and gestured for her to finish the wounded animal. "Go on," he said. "Do it. End its suffering." Ella loaded a bullet into the chamber and closed the bolt. "You heard the calls, Ella. We're surrounded by them," Marlowe continued. "I can keep you alive until help comes. I'm the only chance you have, and you haven't even got that until you show me you're worth saving. Kill the fucking thing!" Ella raised the rifle to her shoulder. She tried to sight through the scope, but tears obscured her view. A long, plaintive whine came from the hippopotamus before it fell still. Ella watched for signs of life, but none came. It had bled out. She let the rifle hang limply in her hands. "How's that for principles?" Marlowe snorted and walked away. "Such an animal lover, but you let one die like that. I reckon that makes you a damn sight worse than me." "Fuck you!" "Keep shouting, Ella. It'll distract the others while I make a run for the hacienda." Ella kept her finger on the trigger as they crossed the clearing. If there was another attack, she'd be ready. Ready to put her one shot right between Marlowe's shoulder blades before she died. Nearby, a hippo bellowed. Ella listened to the number of responses and shook her head. The calls were coming from across the pod's entire range. She tried to guess at how many animals were out there. The number she came up with was entirely too large. She'd assumed the hippo sightings were a secondary herd that had migrated away from the original. She'd anticipated a colony of a dozen at most. The female that attacked them was fully matured and larger than average. A pungent stench disrupted her thoughts. Ella paid attention to the grass for the first time. Hippo shit clung to the long, swaying blades. It had smeared across her shorts and bare legs. Ella stared at the small mansion beyond. It looked like a private getaway and had clearly been abandoned for quite a while. Pablo Escobar had many homes across the country. This one looked special. A place where he was a father and not a drug lord. She froze in her tracks. Hippos were her daughter's favorite animal. "Looks like Pablo was a regular P.T. Barnum," Marlowe said, coming to the same conclusion. He waved a hand at the expansive retaining pond. A rusty fence lay in ruins around it. Red algae formed a thick layer, concealing its murky depths. "Guess they're more effective than guard dogs. The authorities definitely never found this place. I bet there's a ton of cocaine inside." "You won't find out," Ella said. "Oh? Why is that?" Marlowe put his hands on his hips. "I'm perfectly safe as long as you have the gun." Ella aimed the rifle. Marlowe followed the barrel to the pond, and the bubbles popping on its surface. She fired. The stagnant water erupted in a geyser that showered the hunter. The bull sprang up. Marlowe watched the small fortune of ivory stretch open wide. The pink gullet rushed towards him. Darkness enshrouded the poacher. His feet kicked helplessly as he descended whole down the hippo's throat. The 4-ton bull let itself slide off the side and sunk back to the bottom of the lake to digest its meal. Ella walked to the mansion's steps. A baby hippo ran from the porch when it saw her coming. The door was long gone. Inside, she found all the furnishing still in place. It seemed as though Marlowe had been correct about no one finding the property. The local wildlife certainly had, though. Ella flopped onto a couch, freeing 30 years of dust. If she was never found, at least she'd die in style. Ella ejected the empty casing from the rifle and rummaged for another bullet. She wondered if any canned goods would still be edible, or if she'd find some way to call for help. Ella pressed a bullet into the chamber and closed the bolt. There may have been things she could use, but she needed to search while there was still daylight coming through the dingy windows. She begrudgingly gave up the comfort of the sofa. The door frame crashed inward, showering the imported marble with debris. The bull looked around slowly. Ella ducked behind the couch and risked a peek at the animal. Years of battle scars ornamented its flesh. The bull stared back at her and snorted. Its jaw hung open. Ella swore she could hear Marlowe crying deep inside its belly. She'd been so adamant about preserving the Colombian hippos, but she didn't want to die either. She raised the rifle, steadying it on the back of the couch. Tears welled up. She thought about killing it to save herself, only to be killed by another one later. It would all be worthless then. She broke down, sobbing and choking for a breath. She heard the marble cracking under his hooves. The room shook. All she could see was the blurry mammoth form charging at her. Someone was crying out for help. Maybe it was Marlowe, slowly digesting inside. Or maybe it was her own voice, begging for another solution. Heaving, stinking breaths assaulted her as it drew closer. Ella squeezed the trigger. Well, my spookies, that story left a little bit more to whet your appetite. You never know, maybe we'll go back to Colombia and find out what happens. But until then, make sure to check out David O'Hanlon's other great works here at Weekly Spooky, and also by going to Amazon and checking out the Babysitter Massacre books that he penned and I published. That was a lot of fun, and it really brought out a summertime terror that I think we all deserve to enjoy as the temperatures get hotter and hotter. So, thank you, David, and thank you guys for tuning in and listening. I really love sharing something scary with you every single week. And if you missed Monday, well, make sure to check that out if you want something truly terrifying and real, as we covered Carl Tanzler and his real-life corpse bride on Monday's show. So make sure you're subscribed on your favorite podcasting app, because there's always so much going on here at Weekly Spooky, you don't want to miss it. And remember, you can support us directly by going to weeklyspooky.com/join and signing up for as little as $1 a month. Speaking of, I want to say an extra special thank you to our Patreon podcast boosters, folks who pay just a little bit more to hear their name at the end of the show. And they are Johnny Nix, Kate and Lulu, Jessica Fuller, Jenny Green, Amber Hansford, Brent McCullough, Karen Wiemet, Jack Kerr, and Craig Cohen. Thank you all so much, and if you want to hear your name at the end of every episode of Weekly Spooky from my silky, spooky voice, go to weeklyspooky.com/join and sign up at the $15 a month or higher tier. It really does help us keep the show going and going. But now it's time for me to get back to it, because we have something scary for you this Friday, and of course Monday and Wednesday as always. So for myself, for my executive producers Rob Fields, Mark Shields, and Bobbletopia.com, for my producer Dan Wilder, and my composer Ray Mattis, don't mess with hippos unless they're made of plastic, and only eat those little beads. Trust me. Talk at you next time.
Thank you for listening. Make sure to find your way back next week. But for now, you are safe. Trust me.